Hello YouTube, this is HiveRadical. Responding to one YouTuber named ImagineNoReligion. He's posted his response to my recent response to his second video on the Book of Mormon, and this is from atheism versus Mormonism. And his response to me was his third one. He starts off mentioning something on my page. I think he's misunderstood it a bit. He says that I don't agree with the doctrine. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to, but I'm guessing it's right underneath on my let's see, view. Yeah, right underneath my name and everything, I have a quote from Brigham Young. The quote goes thusly, says, "I'm not a stereotyped Latter-day Saint. I do not believe the doctrine. Are we going to stand still? Away with stereotyped Mormons." I think he misread that and thinks that I'm saying that we don't believe in our own doctrine, which is not what it's saying. If it's Brigham Young saying that he doesn't believe in the concept of a stereotyped Latter-day Saint, he doesn't believe that that is a doctrine that we are all supposed to follow in lockstep. He doesn't believe that we just turn off our minds and follow the leader. And that's what that quote's referring to. If you're referencing something else, please let me know, and I'll look at the exact words and context, but I think that was the one you had an issue with. I mean, it continues on in the quote where it says, "The diffidence or timidity we must dispense with. When it becomes our duty to talk, we ought to be willing to talk. Interchanging our ideas and exhibiting that which we believe and understand affords an opportunity for detecting and correcting errors." In short, Brigham Young wasn't for a bunch of people that just never said anything, never talked about what they thought about things or believed, how they saw things. So I hope that clears that up. I do believe in the doctrine of the church. I think it's important to realize that the doctrine of the church is not akin to what you find in many other churches. We don't have a set creed per se. We have articles of faith, but we do believe in continuing revelation. So it is far more expansive, and it adapts to the circumstances of the here and now, because we're never in the same, in some sense, we're never in the same universe that we've been in. Like cosmological constants, for example. They're constant right now, but if you change the energy state of the universe, even cosmological constants can change. So anyway, moving on. You go into talking about the holes you see in the Book of Mormon. I'd like to go off and kind of talk about, you mentioned how they're found on all of these other Christian claiming sites and other religious claiming sites that are trying to debunk Mormonism. I would advise you not to put too much stock in a lot of the arguments, not for just dismissing them out of hand, but simply because they've been addressed. Many of them have been addressed over and over again and have been refuted rather soundly. To demonstrate this, I would encourage you to go to Google and Google the word evangelical and then the word neglect. And if your search pulls up what mine pulled up with those two words, you'll find an article by Owen and Mosier. They were two evangelicals that took to really look at Mormon doctrine and realized how woefully inadequate all of these, I'm guessing many of the sites that you went to, how woefully inadequate their positions were and their attempts to refute Mormon doctrine or historical claims. And so I would advise caution there. Just, again, not for the fact of dismissing any of these things out of hand, but simply because you may be beating a dead horse, as it were. As a good example is the ones that you brought forward as saying as holes in the Book of Mormon. You bring up archaeological and the fact that things are missing on a great many claims as to what, Book of Mormon mentions happened and what's been found so far by archaeological evidence. This arguing based on absences of certain evidence isn't terribly a concrete way of asserting something to not be true. There's a great many things that haven't been found in connection to the Book of Mormon, but that doesn't mean it's not true. For example, if you go back to the time, the place, and the date in which the Hun Empire is encompassed, they have not found a piece of horse remain in archaeological digs that dates to the time and is found in the location. Yes, they found older horse remains, dating previous, and they found horse remains in the grounds that were covered by the Hun Empire, but are dated to different times. So, again, the absence of archaeological evidence is not proof that it did not exist. Another example of this, you mentioned the problem with all the battles. If you look at the Hopewell culture, literally thousands of mounds were scattered throughout North America, and many would argue within prime area for the Book of Mormon to have occurred. And what they found with these is that they'll find a layer of carbon, which kind of indicates that the remains were burned and then buried. And if you've got thousands of these hills, there's some candidates for massive losses of life. And generally, burial mound would mean a mass death. However those deaths occurred, would obviously be up to debate. And I'm not saying that the Hopewell culture mounds, the thousands that were found throughout North America, most of them have been, plowed over for the sake of agricultural convenience, but there's plenty of possible evidence. Now, I'm not saying that I think that they're going to someday uncover some city that says, "Welcome to Zarahemla." For those of you who are not familiar with the Book of Mormon, Zarahemla is potentially one of the biggest cities mentioned in there. You also talk about, for example, Jacobean English being used in the Book of Mormon. In addressing this, I would mention that there's something to be said for the context of a certain language in a certain time. If you're going to speak to a certain audience, as God was intending to, you generally use the lingua franca of the day. If you're going to speak to a bunch of engineers, you're going to use terms that they would be familiar with. If you're going to speak to a bunch of Christians in America at that time, the Jacobean English was the lingua franca of the day. The King James Bible was the most used Bible, and thus it makes a lot of sense that they would employ, that God would employ Jacobean English to translate to. And you say, well, why couldn't he have used a better English? Well, I would ask you to present what would be a better English for that audience, for that time of coming forth. I can't think of a better one. English itself is considered by many to be a bastard language. It is constantly evolving and changing. And even though it was outdated for common use of that day, it was the lingua franca of that day for religious conversation, especially respecting the Bible and the accounts of the Bible. Continuing on, you asked about the use of the words, and it came to pass. There's many cultures that have terms and formats and grammatical setups that repeat things to a certain various things. I would take from it that it's stating the historical nature of the things being said. I don't know all the ins and outs linguistically as to why that's used so much in the Book of Mormon. It is. Take it for what you want. Talk about Hill Cumorah excavation. There's not really, it's not making a lot of sense. Fundamentally, the point of the church has never been to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt to the world, what is true and what isn't true. If that was God's intent, I think he would appear to everybody and just show himself to everyone. The concept of faith is to provide some sort of balance so that people who are seeking and want to know can come to find out, and people who do not want to find out will not be held to the greater condemnation when they have received truth that they were unready for and unwilling to abide by. That's part of the answer. There's quite a bit more to that answer. And so, the intent of the Book of Mormon, just as with Christ's resurrection or with the issuance of the Ten Commandments, is not to irrefutably prove to everybody who ever sees them that they were true, but is to make the truth available to those who wish to find it and wish to abide by it, or have a desire to abide by it. And so, there's also some interesting concepts with the idea of appealing to the material world. I'm curious as to what you're seeing as being, say, the material world or scientific inquiry. I mean, scientific inquiry. In fact, I referenced you to a recent talk given in our last general conference, and it was given by